Good morning.
Morning.
We're going to teach you some Suryoyo today. So we will start with قدش القاديشة ولتخايو زوديق دنيثيهبون بالحول. You see it on the screen in Syriac and transliterated. If we were paying attention, this Abuna just said this phrase less than 5 minutes ago. It was the last thing that happened on the altar when Abuna was elevating the cup and the paten with the bread and the wine. He declared, قدش القاديشة, it is right that these mysteries, that means the bread and the wine, be given only to the holy and to the pure. Holy is Qadisho in Suryoyo, and maybe you know it from the hymn Qadish, Qadish, Qadish that our choir most beautifully chanted just a few minutes ago as well. So what is a Qadisho? What is a holy? And those of you who already know Suryoyo, you may know the word Qadisho for saint. Mor Jacob is Qadisho, Mor Ephraim is Qadisho, Mor Augin, Mor Barsoumo. Qadisho is a saint, and the feminine form is Qadishto, like the Virgin Mary is Qadishto, Mor Shmuni is Qadishto. And we may have to wrap our heads about what Abuna just said on the altar, that the Qudshe, the blood and the bread, can only be given to the holy, to the Qadishe, and to the pure. Now Abuna, after we are done with the sermon and the procession, as he does every Sunday, is going to come and give us the sacraments. So he's just said it can only be given to the holy and to the pure. So who are the holy and the pure? It is us the holy and the pure. And we may be a bit confused, how can we be saints? How can we, the weak and sinful, and we do all sorts of things every day, how can we be the holy and the pure? And the confusion comes from our notion of saint, which is, in English, is a Western idea of sainthood. In the Western church, there is a canonization process to make a saint. You know, if you belong to the Catholic Church, you can just become a saint. There's a formal process of doing that. But in the Eastern Church, it's not quite the same. In the Eastern tradition, sainthood and sanctification and becoming holy is a natural process. It is intrinsic process and kind of organic. You become a saint by what you do, usually by prayers, by fasting, by being a good person. For this reason, we have many local saints, but we have some saints that acquire international recognition and they are accepted by all churches, like Mor Ephraim, for example. Saint Ephraim is accepted by our church, the other Orthodox churches, the Greek churches, the Russian church, the Catholic church. So we say that that is a universal saint in comparison to local saints. So what are the characteristics of sainthood from our perspective, from the Suryoyo perspective? We're talking about holy men and women, especially in the early times of the church. These are normal people like you and I. There is no magic about it, about being a Qadisho. Of course, you can be a horrible person and be a Qadisho. But at the same time, it's not magic to be a Qadisho. In the early years of Christianity, in early Syriac Christianity, we have texts that actually give the title Qadisho, saint, to married people who are living in a way of holiness. Sometimes they're abstaining from sexual relations, even though they are married. They are very much involved with prayers, with fasting, self-denial, being good. This is how one can become a Qadisho in the Syriac tradition. And there is a very nice phrase that I came across while I was preparing for this sermon, and it hooks up with the phrase that Abuna said, that the mysteries are only given to the holy and the pure, to the Qadishe and the Tchayo. This phrase comes from the teaching of Adai. Adai was one of the 70 disciples that are mentioned in the book of Acts. Not all their names are mentioned, but according to our tradition, Adai is one of the 70 saints. He was sent to Edessa, to Urfa, to meet King Abgar. And in that story, we have this phrase that says, all the Bnei Qiyomo. So let's first talk about the Bnei Qiyomo. The Bnei Qiyomo are the sons and daughters of Qiyomo. Qiyomo is the covenant. It's a class of people that were attached to the service of the church, were dedicated to the church. Today we use Bat Qiyomo for the wife of the priest. For example, here you have Bat Qiyomo Madeleine. Every parish has its own Bat Qiyomo. In the early days, the Bnei Qiyomo were people who were dedicated to the church and to the service of the church. So it describes them that these were holy and pure, Qadishe and Tchayo. This text is maybe from the 4th or the 5th century, the same exact words that Abuna is repeating, that these mysteries are given to the holy, to the Qadishe, and to the pure, us basically. And we know a lot about saints. I'm just going to talk about 3 of them later on. Abuna mentioned them already in the sermon. But all this encyclopedia that I'm just showing you, about 100-something years ago, somebody called Bejan published the stories of the saints in Syria. Each of these books is about 1,000 pages. That's how much we know about Syriac saints. And they're important texts because they tell us also about the history of normal people, like me, you and I. But these were people that dedicated their lives for the service of the church. So today, as I said, I'm going to talk about 3 of these saints. Today we are celebrating the entrance to the temple, where Jesus was brought as a child to the temple, and we're going to have a procession later on. So with that we celebrate Mor Shimun Sobo, Shimun al-Sheikh. Some of you may know it in Arabic. So this is our first saints today. The celebration of Mor Shimun Sobo was actually 2-3 days ago, on February 2nd. But we don't do liturgies during the week in America. It's an American tradition. So we are celebrating it today. So we know about him from the Bible. This is kind of a saint that is rooted in the Bible. Other saints are after Bible times, but Mor Shimun Sobo is from biblical time. Abuna just read during the Gospel reading that Simon was upright and righteous. So these are 2 things that will bring us to sanctification, will bring us to sainthood. He would not see death before seeing the Messiah. He was a very old man, and the Holy Spirit was promised that he will not die before he sees the Messiah, the baby Jesus. So when Mary and Joseph brought him to the temple as a little kid, he held him and he said, "Now dismiss your servant in peace, O Lord, according to your word." And of course, Joseph and Mary, what's going on here? This is a little kid. What's happening? And even after Mor Shimun Sobo, also in the same story, we have Anna the prophetess. Also, she's mentioned in Luke, and Abuna read it in the Gospels today. She was married for some time, and then she became a widow for 84 years, never left the temple. She served the temple night and day in prayers and fasting. These are also 2 actions that bring one to sainthood: prayers and fasting. Obviously, self-denial, being good to one another. And then she rose when she saw the child and gave thanks to the Lord, and she spoke to everybody who was there about the child. So that's Mor Shimun Sobo, or Sim'an al-Sheikh. The second saint I'm going to talk about today is Mor Barsoumo. His feast was on February 3rd. I got it right, that's yesterday. Mor Shimun Sobo was born in Somisata in the Euphrates, on the Euphrates. That's in Turkey. And when he was young, he met a hermit. Hermit is a kind of a monk who lives in the mountains or in caves. And he affected him, he taught him. So then Mor Barsoumo decided himself to become a monk. And we know a lot about Mor Barsoumo's from his story, but the thing that comes out is again what I mentioned before, prayer and fasting. Even the emperor heard so much about him, about prayer and fasting, that he invited him to attend the Council of Ephesus. After the sermon and just before you are ready to take the Korbono, you're going to be reciting the confession together, right? And you say, you give your faith, you say, I believe in the three ecumenical councils of Constantinople, Nicaea, and Ephesus. Yeah? So he was invited to attend Ephesus, but he was not a bishop. Usually it's the bishops that go to these councils. He was even given the right to vote in this council, even though he was not a bishop. So that is a privilege that was given to him. And after that, he went on pilgrimage to Palestine, to Jerusalem. We know that he went to Sinai, the mountain where the commandments were given. And he established a monastery near Malatya in Turkey. That is basically the monastery of Mor Barsoumo. It's a very famous monastery. We don't know much about it these days because it doesn't exist. It's only ruins. But it was the seat of our Patriarchate. Now our Patriarch is in Damascus. Before Damascus, it was in Mardin, in Deir el-Za'far, for many generations. Before Deir el-Za'far, it was in Mor Barsoumo Monastery. I had the privilege to visit Mor Barsoumo, or the ruins of Mor Barsoumo, with the kidnapped bishop, Mor Elias II. We went together. It took us a long time to find it. It's in an area of all mountains, just mountains. And if you pass a village, that village won't have more than 10 houses. Really remote area. Finally, we had directions from people who found it before us, from Lebanon, from the University of Kasli. They gave us instructions, go to this village, then to that village, and ask there. And finally, we found a big mountain, and it looked like there are ruins there. So we started climbing. Now, I am a city boy, so it was not difficult, it was not easy for me. And Bishop Hanna also, much older than me, even then. So after climbing, we stopped, we camped. And the Bishop of Malatya was there with us, Sayyidina Malke. And he's running up the mountain. So he said, I'm going to go find it. If I find it, I'll tell you. So he went, just running up. And then after about half an hour, he was shouting, and like with the echo, it's really far where he was. So we decided to continue. And I said to Sayyidina Yohanna Ibrahim, I said, Sayyidina, we're crazy. If we fall, khalas, this is it. There is no, are you going to live or not? There is no path. We were like driving really steep hills. And finally we got there, and I have a video of Sayyidina from the top of the mountain talking. And then it dawned on me, I said, Sayyidina, another mistake we did. This is what? I said, we should have brought elements with us to do Korbono here. Because who's going to come here again? Maybe we were the last people who went to that monastery or to the ruins of that monastery. So that is the monastery that Mor Barsoumo established.
Any screenshot?
Pardon?
Any screenshot?
No, I didn't have time to find pictures, but I do have pictures that I took there, and hopefully I'll find them. You know, you get to my age and then you stop forgetting where you saved things. Another thing, before we move from Mor Barsoumo, we also mention every Sunday, or we used to mention every Sunday, Mor Barsoumo in the diptychs. The diptych is when the deacon is in the middle and he's first commemorating the patriarch and the saints. Then we have a long one commemorating the Malphono, the teachers of the church. And there's Mor Barsoumo, the head of the anchorites. Unfortunately, because we always complain the liturgy is too long, so the church omits these things, so we don't say this diptych. But maybe on a feast like Feast of Saint Barsoumo, maybe we should be saying it. I just wanted to mention it. Finally, the last saint I want to talk about, the February saint, is Patriarch Elias II. He was born in 1867 and died in 1932. So you might be thinking, yeah, but this is like just 100 or so years ago. Usually when we talk about saints, we talk about saints from hundreds of years ago. Saint George, Mor Elias II, Mor Barsoumo. But this indicates to us that the church is a living church. The church needs to produce saints all the time. So the church does produce saints even in later times. He is celebrated by our church in India because he died in India. So he was a patriarch residing in Mardin, the last patriarch to reside in Mardin. After Saifo, we all left that area. Also, he had to leave the modern state of Turkey. He was no longer welcome, the patriarch, to stay there. So he went first to Jerusalem. The idea was that they would establish the Patriarchate in Jerusalem. So they stayed for a few years trying to establish the Patriarchate of Jerusalem in Jerusalem. I want to tell you just one story that tells us how we start thinking of people as saints. So during those days, I don't know if any of you were in Jerusalem in our St. Mark's. It's in the old city of Jerusalem. Somebody knocked on the door and said, I have a special business with the patriarch. So someone opened the door from inside the monastery and told them, whom do you want to speak to? He said, I want to speak to the patriarch. That person was cleaning up and was working in the garden, wasn't really in good appearance. At any rate, he took him to the Patriarchate on the top, which is a big salon, and he told him, wait till the patriarch will come. 10 minutes later, Patriarch Elias came, dressed up nicely with a cross and an icon and so on and so forth. That man did not recognize that the person who opened the door for him was the patriarch. It was the patriarch doing work in the monastery. And it's actions like this humility, this self-denial, that people started thinking of him as a saint. It's not a formal process in our church. It is normal people like you and I who get to that stage by basically being good. So remember, in a few minutes, the holy and the pure, us, the Qadisha, the Tchayo, are going to be taking the sacraments because Abuna said it is right that these mysteries be given only to the holy and to the pure, to us. Tawlisagi for Abuna, for the board, for inviting me to speak, and thank you for listening. I hope I wasn't too long. I tried to keep it under 20 minutes. It's 19 minutes and 40 seconds.